The room is full. Music, laughter, people you actually like. You're in the middle of it, smiling, talking, present. And somewhere underneath all of that, there's a quiet, persistent feeling that nobody in this room actually knows you. Not because they don't care, they do. You have friends, real ones even, people who'd show up if you called. But there's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't go away just because you're surrounded by people. If anything, it gets louder in a crowded room. If that sounds familiar, this video is going to explain something that's surprisingly common and almost never talked about, because on paper, it doesn't make sense. You have people, so why does it still feel like you don't? Here's the first thing to understand. Loneliness was never really about how many people are around you. Researchers who study this make a clear distinction between two things that get confused constantly. Social isolation, which is about quantity, the actual number of people in your life, and emotional loneliness, which is about quality, whether the connections you have actually reach the parts of you that need to be known. You can have a packed contact list and a calendar full of plans, and still score high on emotional loneliness. In fact, some of the loneliest people aren't isolated at all. They're booked solid. This isn't rare. Multiple studies on young adults in particular have found that nearly half report feeling lonely on a regular basis, and most of them are not socially isolated in any visible way. They have friends, they have group chats, they have plans every weekend. So if it's not about the number of people, what is it about? There are 4 things going on, and each one explains a different version of this same experience. The first one is what we can call emotional bandwidth mismatch. Think about the actual conversations you have with the people in your life. Not the logistics, not the "what time are we meeting" or "did you see that show?" but the conversations where you talk about what's actually happening inside you. How often does that happen? And with how many people? For most people, the honest answer is rarely, and with almost no one. Friendship, especially in adulthood, tends to organize itself around shared activities and shared history rather than emotional depth. You have the friend you go to the gym with, the friend from college you text memes to, the friend from work you complain about work with. Each relationship is real, but each one only holds a slice of you. The result is that you can be fully known across many people and fully understood by none of them. Nobody is getting the complete picture because no single relationship was ever built to carry that weight, and you never quite found or made time for the kind of conversation that would let it. This isn't anyone's fault. It's just what happens when connection gets distributed across many shallow channels instead of concentrated in a few deep ones. The second reason is more behavioral, and it's one most people don't recognize in themselves until it's pointed out. Psychologists who study social behavior describe something they sometimes call performed connection, the version of yourself that shows up to be around people, the version that's a little more upbeat, a little more agreeable, quicker to laugh, slower to bring up anything heavy. It's not fake, exactly. It's more like a role you've gotten so good at playing that you stopped noticing you were playing it. You learned, probably a long time ago, that the easygoing version of you gets invited back. The version that brings up doubt or sadness or uncertainty gets a slightly different reaction. Politeness instead of warmth, a subject change instead of a follow-up question. So you adjusted. Most people do, and over enough years, the adjustment becomes the default setting, to the point where you might not even know what the unfiltered version of you sounds like in a social setting anymore. Here's the problem with that. Connection requires being seen. And if the version of you that shows up socially is the curated one, then even in a room full of people who like you, none of them are actually responding to you. They're responding to the performance, which means the part of you that needed to be seen is still standing alone, just off stage. The third reason has to do with attachment, and specifically with something researchers call deactivating strategies. Not everyone who feels distant from their friendships is doing it on purpose. For some people, particularly those who developed a more avoidant attachment style early in life, closeness itself can register as something faintly unsafe, even when nothing bad is actually happening. The nervous system learned, at some point, that depending on someone too much or needing too much from them carries risk. Maybe that need wasn't reliably met. Maybe it was met, but came with strings attached. Either way, the adaptation was the same. Keep people close enough to enjoy, but not close enough to need. In practice, this looks a lot like having plenty of friends. It just doesn't feel like having anyone to fully lean on. There's an invisible ceiling on how deep things are allowed to go. And most people who do this aren't choosing it consciously. They just notice, vaguely, that conversations stay at a certain depth and never quite move past it. The friendships are genuine. The warmth is real. But there's a regulating mechanism quietly making sure nobody gets close enough to matter too much. And that mechanism, while it kept you safe once, is also the thing standing between you and feeling less alone now. The fourth reason is the simplest, and probably the most overlooked. Most people have never actually been taught what real connection requires. Nobody sits you down and explains that closeness needs maintenance, that it's built through repeated small moments of being known, not through proximity or shared history alone. So when the loneliness shows up despite having friends, the instinct is to assume something is wrong with the friendships or with you, instead of recognizing that connection is a skill, and a fairly specific one. It requires initiating vulnerability before you feel ready. It requires tolerating the awkward pause after you say something real, instead of immediately joking to diffuse it. It requires letting someone see you not have it together more than once and staying anyway. Most people never had a model for that. They had models for being polite, for being fun to be around, for keeping things light. Nobody modeled the part where you let the mask slip on purpose, because that's the part that actually closes the distance. Here's what I want you to take from all of this. Feeling alone despite having friends doesn't mean your friendships are fake or that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It means the depth of connection you're getting hasn't caught up with the number of people around you, and those are two completely different things. Emotional bandwidth spread thin across many relationships. A performed version of yourself that gets responded to instead of the real one. A nervous system that learned to keep closeness at a safe distance. A skill set for depth that nobody ever actually taught you. None of these are permanent traits. They're patterns. And patterns, unlike personality, can shift. Usually starting with one conversation where you let something real slip out with one person and notice that the room doesn't end. That's not weakness. That's just the next conversation you haven't had yet. If any part of this landed, if you've got people in your life and still feel this specific kind of alone, I'd like to know which of the 4 reasons hit closest. Tell me in the comments. And if this connected with you, the first 2 videos on this channel explore a similar idea from a different angle. Why some of the things we do automatically without ever questioning them turn out to say a lot more about us than we realized. I'll see you in the next one.